Calvin still alive as it reaches the Hawaiian Islands on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for July 19th. Well, we have two tropical storms active, Calvin and Don. Talim has succumbed to the Asian landmass and has piled inland and is now a remnant low. Code blue on our operation status, and we now have 30 storms to this year's name, with Don turning tropical a couple of days ago. Day 49 of Atlantic hurricane season, and there he is, venturing southwards now, and we've still got that 10% area of interest in the main development region, although chances aren't looking that good for it now. Models have backed off its long-term forecast as well, just so you know. Day 67 of Eastern Pacific hurricane season, Calvin will make landfall in Hawaii later this evening local time, and then it will weaken drastically as it passes the Big Island just to the south and then out towards the rest of the Central Pacific. There'll be very little left of it. Talim inland, still traceable but now a remnant low, and an 80% chance for an area of interest in the Western Pacific, the Philippine Sea near Palau right now. Will be moving northwestwards and could become a strong typhoon. We also have an area of interest that we've now just marked in the Bay of Bengal, a 10% towards the end of the 7-day period. It's unlikely that we get things like this at this time of year, but not impossible, although the models sometimes do hype these things up and we end up getting nothing. I would suggest so far that will be the case as well, but of course we can't be too sure. Satellite imagery of the last 24 hours looks like this, and you can see it's been fairly quiet overall. Most of the rainfall has probably occurred from that invest near Palau in the deep tropics of the Pacific. You can also just about make out Calvin on the far left hand side of that image. And here is Calvin now on a close-up imagery, and to be honest, it's not only just surviving, it is actually doing quite well. Estimates from National Hurricane Center suggest that it could have winds of 60 miles per hour. We're going with 50 at the moment as it gradually moves towards the west. It's partially exposed, but it's got a large chunk of convection, although it does look like it's waning in those latest frames. It's, as mentioned, gradually moving westwards. The north side of it has all of that convection, and obviously lots of rainfall contained in that and some strong winds. And you can see Hawaii now getting very close to the Big Island, but it will pass the center just south by the looks of things of the southern tip of the Big Island of Hawaii. It is now appearing on radar. You can start to see some of the storm's bands. It's a small system, no surprises there. For a system that struggled across the Central Pacific, we weren't expecting much in size. Here's Don moving gradually southwards and just holding on at the moment. With convection on the eastern side, the National Hurricane Center decided to upgrade it again to tropical storm status 40 miles per hour, and we're in agreement with that at the moment, just about managing tropical storm status. Eastern Pacific sea surface temperatures are still decent across the whole coast of Mexico, and they are getting better further west as well, and extending right up the Gulf of California, by the way. Gulf of Mexico really hot right now, a hot spot there, and off the Florida Keys, very warm, 32 degrees or more. Same too near the Bahamas and up the Gulf Stream, temperatures getting really high there as well. Main development region also looking good, it's primed for development. Western Pacific also getting up there quite high up in the latitudes now. Most of Kyushu underneath 26 degrees Celsius waters, and the main areas of interest in the Western Pacific have good temperatures, although a few cool spots after those two systems. Of course, Talim in the South China Sea and that secondary system that didn't form to the east. Bay of Bengal, a real hot spot there in the tropical zone, but further north you can see temperatures still around 30 degrees Celsius. Southwest Indian Ocean, of course, cool now at this time of year. It is off season, as is everywhere in the southern hemisphere. Australian region getting really cool now on some of those coastlines, and towards the South Pacific, Fiji starting to cool down, as is Vanuatu. That trend should continue for another month or two. This is the sea surface temperature anomalies. Western Pacific, a little bit of a cool spot or two now after this recent wave of activity. Eastern Pacific still has that big cool swathe there, but the very eastern part of the basin looking good. Atlantic is looking good pretty much everywhere. A little cool spot now, believe it or not, from Don's influence. I didn't think it was possible that it could achieve that. Its influence is so small, but the eastern Atlantic still piping hot with temperatures well above, or at least at 3 degrees above average. Oceanic heat content continues to build steadily in the Caribbean Sea. Large areas there of very high values, but look at the Gulf Stream extending well off the eastern seaboard of the United States with some values of oceanic heat content. Lots of energy off the coast of Mexico as well, but not much else in the eastern Pacific. Westpac is still holding firm as well and getting much better into those higher latitudes too, so it's got good values going for it at the moment. Atlantic then, we're looking at Don here swiveling around towards the south and the west, and then it does manage to possibly strengthen some more as it veers towards the north again on that second loop round and could even get close to Newfoundland. There's also a second little system to the west of it there that the GFS has thrown up again. You may remember we covered something similar a few days ago. That didn't materialize, and I doubt that this one will either. Might just be some feedback loops. And this is Calvin. You'll see here its center passes just south of the big island of Hawaii, and then it's pretty much done after that. It loses its circulation, a little northward blip there in that motion path, but then it mainly moves westwards out towards the international date line, but there's very little left of it. Even after it leaves the proximity of Hawaii, it is gone. But certainly it's had a good go, and I think Calvin has slightly overachieved to make it to Hawaii as a mid-range tropical storm. Western Pacific, after Talim, we've got this next system in the Philippine Sea that could become an extremely powerful typhoon possibly, but in the formative stages that's what it's looking like there up to day 5, and it could still get to major typhoon status in that time. Look towards the South China Sea as well, lots of rotating going on there for a potential system still that might form off the coast of Vietnam. We used to have chances for that, but we did drop it completely. We're not very certain about that at all. And this is the rainfall expectations for the Philippine region. Because we're not showing Calvin zone, let me just tell you that we're expecting up to 4 inches of rain on the big island of Hawaii. That's 100 millimeters. But looking across the Western Pacific area then, for this potential typhoon on the way, and maybe that other system in the South China Sea, it's going to enhance rainfall over parts of the Philippine Islands, mainly in Mindoro. Also 1 or 2 spots there inland in Indochina, 14 inches there, that's over 350 millimeters of rain. In parts of the Philippines there, getting up towards 10 inches, that's 250 millimeters. In Palau, 4 inches there, and also in Yap, 6 or 7 inches possible there, that's up to nearly 200 millimeters of rainfall on those small islands. After that, this potential storm will move northwestwards, and there's no other land masses in the way. Longer range then, we're looking this time towards the Eastern Pacific, because the GFS and I think other models have completely dropped that Atlantic system that people were getting quite excited about, but instead now forming a little system there that does get some strength, but it is towards the end of that 10-day period, so it is a little bit wishy-washy. It ends up developing not far from southwestern Mexico there on the Pacific side, of course, and then turns towards the northwest. We just lost the end of it there. And here is what happens in the Western Pacific. This typhoon balloons in size and intensity, passing through the Ryukyu Islands as at least a Category 4, and then continuing northwards towards the Korean Peninsula. And that's actually a typhoon landfall in North Korea there. That's not very often you see things like that, but nonetheless, that's what the GFS has in mind for day 5 to 10. Can't completely rule that out, but I think that's a little bit boisterous at the moment. You can follow our merch store, you can find our merch store, scan the barcode, and that will take you straight there on our Force 13 site. We have all the usual products, full season individual storm animations at your request, and still waiting for Hode t-shirts, the highlight of our range right now. Speaking of range, Scilly Range looks like this. In fact, there is nothing in the Scilly Range apart from the continuation of this Pacific system that dies off relatively quickly before it reaches the Baja California Peninsula. Nothing at the Yucatan, incidentally, or anywhere else around the world on day 10 to 16 on the GFS. So nothing much in the Scilly Range apart from this, and if there was, then this is pretty good proof that you shouldn't really trust it, because last time we looked at Scilly Range it had all kinds of stuff going on. All of that has been dropped and it could easily come back next time. You can talk about all of that on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13, for tropical weather and general weather chat for people from all around the world discussing all kinds of topics. On this day, July 19th, 1991, Typhoon Amy was just coming off its mid-range Category 4 peak and was just starting to weaken as it passed close to southern Taiwan. It was moving northwestwards and would go on to strike China. It was a powerful typhoon as it approached and made landfall in China later on in that day, I believe. I'm not sure how impactful that storm was, but it was the only one active on this day. Small imagery outage there in the Eastern Pacific, and that's what we had. Nothing else around the world on this date, 32 years ago. Back to today, the next name on the Atlantic list is Emily, and we've got 4 in a row now that have that green colour. In the Eastern Pacific, the next name is Dora, and in the Central Pacific, of course, we are still waiting for Hone. 30 storms so far this year, which I feel is a little bit below average, but I'm not sure. The next name in the Western Pacific is Doksuri, and in North Indian Ocean it would be Tej. In the Southern Hemisphere, of course, things will get going later on this year. We don't expect much to happen for at least a few months yet, but the next names in the Australian region are Jasper. Southwest Indian Ocean, Alvaro will start the next season, and in the South Pacific it will be Lola. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.